Great library of Arathes, golden city of Elves, the wise scholars of Grey Sage present the unlikely and highly questionable accounts from those who were avowed witness. These are the suspenseful investigations of the human, Fraenk Neversleep, Arch-Preceptor of Blackroot. And now, the Neversleep Scrolls, Circle of the Mind Thief, written by Phillip Walton. The story continues. Chapter 10. The position of Arch-Preceptor has a long and storied history in the kingdom of Sarmati. Most of it, unfortunately for the idly curious, is a guarded secret. It is said that they could pull the strings of those in power, even installing their own figureheads in leadership so they could rule at a distance. And there was an age when they were not content with staying in the shadows. The spy masters eventually supplanted their elven lords. The monarch had to specifically outlaw a preceptor from ever becoming a lord. Due to its very nature, the work that a preceptor does, subterfuge, deception, and ciphers, are not only what allowed one to be effective in their work, but also kept them alive. Even still, the life expectancy of a preceptor was strikingly low, even for elves and half-elves who traditionally held all important positions of power at the district level and higher. The dangerous undertakings of the preceptor service often meant being in places where one was not welcome, learning things others did not want one to know, and strange acts of unconventional diplomacy which could result in the death of one party or another. There was a time not that long ago when all preceptors, and especially the arch-preceptor themselves, wielded a tremendous amount of unchecked power. A single word could send scoundrels scattering. A mere glance could stop the most hardened cutthroat in his tracks. And anyone deemed too troublesome had a regular habit of coming down with a terminal case of headlessness, or possibly a malignant lack of vital organs. However, as time went on, the very definition of who was troublesome grew hazardously vague. It was a tremendous amount of work to run a district with that level of iron-fisted control and terror. The job was notoriously plagued with internal corruption and infighting amongst the other district Acherons, but also challenged by outside resistance from the criminals and citizenry alike. When Fraenk first took over, he knew that he held none of the authority that an elf would command, and still faced the same perils. Many expected him to be killed within the fortnight, or turn to committing terrible atrocities in the name of establishing himself as the first human spy master of Blackroot. But to everyone's surprise, Frank's approach was to use charm and negotiation, skills he forged on the streets. Once he had won the hearts of the average resident of the district, criminality became much less pervasive, and a healthy stream of money began to flow back into the pockets of the elves. Human or not, his contemporaries had no choice but to respect him as well. Who could have imagined that the job of the arch-preceptor was much easier with a light touch? Information moved much more freely. Local insurgency and rebellion against authority was a thing of the past, and the critical work of keeping the High Lord informed and positioned to make the best decisions for the district was a matter of course. Frank's achievement, and as a result, Blackroot District's success caused a ripple effect throughout other districts' preceptor services in Arathes. Of course, the downside to this light-touched approach was that there were still the thugs out there who only responded to a direct application of violence. Fraenk himself was not a violent man by nature. He had trained with a transient monk in the form of Atterdash, an unarmed defensive combat style, and had also become quite adept at thrown blades, which he tried to reserve as a last resort. Being widely known for killing was not only against his personal code, but in a professional sense, was very counterproductive. This was the primary reason why Fraenk did not reach for the brace of throwing knives on his hip and drop each man where they stood. However, fighting them 5 against 1 was also less than ideal. They were all trained soldiers, perhaps a bit drunk, but they would still give him trouble facing each individually, let alone as a group. And worse still, Coldfrost was still counted as a Blackroot ally, so long as Fraenk didn't do anything now to jeopardize that. "Grab him! Watch him! He's a tricky Snicks! Get around behind!" the men called out as they were coordinating their approach. He was carefully being boxed in. To Frank's further dismay, their shouting had initiated the gathering of a curious group of onlookers. This seemed to definitively put to rest the question of quietly and efficiently murdering these men and feeding their bodies to the mosswater carp. Furthermore, It would not do for the Arch-Preceptor to be publicly and embarrassingly beaten by these hooligans either. Running away would make him look like a coward. Not great, but that was increasingly becoming his very best option. Fraenk prepared himself to plough over Mouseface and make his escape. "He's gonna run! Don't let him get away!" Bullneck shouted to his friends, anticipating his next move. Then something unexpected happened. A tall man with a strong jaw and swept brown hair stepped into the space created by the crowd, followed by 6 more men. All of them soldiers, and all of them had the sigil of Black Root on their doublets. They were all dressed for revelry, not battle, but with careful attention to display the emblem of their army unity, along with any rank or special duty designators. On their belts they wore daggers instead of swords. Each raised hands like seasoned brawlers. From their posture, it was understood that any disputes would be handled by fists, not steel. "Oh there, boys," the man called, crossing his toned arms across his chest. His smile was friendly, but there was menace in his posture. The Coldfrost soldiers spun, ready for a fight, but they faltered, seeing they were not only outnumbered, but were being met by men who hadn't spent the last several days of long hours debasing themselves, and were much more combat-ready. "We were—" Mouseface started to explain. "From the looks of it, you were about to disrespect our Arch-Preceptor," he said. "But what you should do is head back to your district and get a little rest. You'll feel better." The soldiers exchanged furtive glances between themselves and the contingent of Blackroot men, who looked ready and eager to beat them all bloody. Then, as bullies who suddenly found themselves quaffing their own foul tincture shrank like slugs in a bucket of ice water, even Bullneck lost his manly vigour. "You're still standing here. I guess that means we stomp you," the Blackroot man said and tipped 2 fingers in their direction. Blackroot soldiers advanced like they were charging the enemy. The Coldfrost men immediately scattered, shoving through the crowd and off down the street. Fraenk tried to straighten and felt a sharp pain across his ribs. He could see an opening through his shirt where a long but superficial cut was open across his side. "That's the second shirt today," Fraenk muttered, dismayed. The brown-haired soldier approached with a broad smile. Up close, his features could have been that of a handsome man, but somehow their assemblage and proportions made him somewhat of an acquired taste. Fraenk was glad to see him nonetheless. "Leos Mudninker. I suppose I owe you a drink for that one," Fraenk said, picking up his cloak. "The boys too." "What? That? Nah, it was nothing. I was doing them a favour. Gods help the man that crosses Frank Neversleep." Leos clapped Fraenk warmly on the shoulder. "Besides, we can't let those sons of Skarks in here upsetting the general folk. Gets them thinking they can do whatever they want." Fraenk felt the subtle recrimination in his friend's tone. "A lot of soldiers came home and forgot how we do things in the districts, even the ones that grew up here," Fraenk replied levelly. He removed a tiny jar about the size of his thumb from another pouch inside his cloak. "That's true enough," his friend conceded, folding his arms. "They find out direct that the lovely war ain't like what the singers boast in the plays and the songs neither. It's not half the glory and double the sorrow." Then Leos's smile faltered. "Yeah, did the songs say you'd each come home with a fat chest of gold?" Fraenk growled and winced as he smeared white cream from the jar on his cut. "Seems like most come home with some misaligned intent, like they still got some warring to do. Or just give them time to settle back in, Fraenk. They're not bad men. They just need to keep their hands busy. You might think about adding on a few extra guards to help keep the ladies' peace in the meantime," Leos suggested. Fraenk could hear a question in his tone. In his mind, Fraenk had a picture of the prison guard, the one who slipped the shiv to the assassin, now with a preceptor's badge pinned to his cloak. A single infiltrator breaching the preceptor service could be devastating, but several could be catastrophic to the entire district. And there was the other matter as well. He and Leos might be friends now, but the past was a thorny place. The scars made their might fade, but they never went away entirely. Before Fraenk could reply, the pound of footsteps approached. Fraenk looked over to see Nim Stonebridge coming from up the street, pushing through the dispersing crowd. "And my auxiliary finally arrives," Fraenk said sarcastically. Nim stopped in front of them, red-faced and out of breath. It took him several seconds to speak. "Do you need to lie down first?" Fraenk quipped. "Sorry, Fraenk. I came as soon as I heard the trouble," Nim panted. I think we got it under control now. Fraenk saw Nim give a questioning look at the other man. Nim Stonebridge, meet Leos Muninger. He's an old friend. Nim works for me when the opportunity suits him. The two men shook hands. Nim turned back to Fraenk. Well, you see, I was on my way here and got tipped that members of the Palewood Brethren were poking around the docks. Rumour goes they's looking for a place to summon some nether demon from the underrealm called Bazaar. So I followed these acolytes, backwards Tigranian cultists here. Leos's laugh was big and echoed off the window panes on the street. Fraenk looked dubious as well. From the reports I've read, the interrogers questioned the very last one of them cultists until all the poor yokel's finger and toenails fell off, Fraenk said. Who tipped you off, Nim? Tall one in the street, he said defensively. Could have been a demon himself. He was covered horns to toes in grey linen, Nim said. Hell-touched. I've seen him too. Fraenk was suddenly curious. Oh, where is he now? Nim shook his head. I was by the lower market when he stopped me. Should we go have a look just to make sure there's no nether demons over there now buying affordable trousers from the merchants of Seleucis? Fraenk winked mischievously. Nim was unamused. Fraenk swept on his cloak and tied it about his neck, then pulled out his noteboard and quill. And while we're there, I need to see about something that's been troubling me with that bakery. Fraenk ruminated as he scratched out a quick note to himself. Oh, yes, I suppose I should probably inspect what foul conflagration Lady Blackroot has wrought in the market as well. Did you know she made some absurd deal with the Fernbrooks on my behalf, Nim? Nim's eyes widened with apprehension. Sir, I believe everyone knows, unfortunately. Did she tell you specifically what she arranged? Nim tried to speak, but Fraenk was turning back to the large soldier. Leos, I still owe you that drink. Fraenk warmly gripped the man's hand. But duty calls, excuse us. All right, Fraenk, I'll find you later. We have much to discuss, Leos Muninger said with a toothy smile and wave as Fraenk strode away. Sir, I'm serious. Did no one tell you about the market? A panicked Nim scrambled to catch up. What in the Book of Brand is going on here? Fraenk roared, standing at the entrance gate of the lower market bazaar. Large green banners on either side of the gates bearing the Fernbrook sigil fluttered in the gentle breeze. A row of Fernbrook guards stood in shiny gold armour and tall spears. I tried to tell you, sir. Nim breathed heavily, still trying to settle. That dotty old bat traded away the entire bazaar. For me. It appears so, sir. Nim looked down. Does she know how much gold this place brings in? Fraenk growled, getting even more heated. I'm sure she's aware of it. Nim wouldn't meet his gaze. And then why did she do it? Fraenk snapped. I'm loath to hazard a guess, sir. You're certainly not worth it. I know that, Fraenk shouted, drawing a look from several of the Fernbrook spearmen. They exchanged a whispered conversation, then their leader, a half-elf with gold-trimmed epaulets, walked toward them. Archpreceptor Neversleep, the peevish captain called as he approached. It was as much a challenge than an address of rank. Tanned and toned, the captain was recognizable as one of the recently returned soldiers, one who probably commanded an entire unit in the army, and now was somehow reduced to a simple guard duty position. That's right. Frank's temper boiled at the surface and was in no mood for foolishness. Oh, look, sir, someone else who doesn't like you, Nim said ruefully. I've been instructed to inform you that Lower Market Bazaar is now under the protection and purview of Fernbrook District, the captain said once he had halted and clacked his heels together with military precision. I can see that, Fraenk hissed. All you had to do was murder a baker and his family, and now you've got the whole market all to yourselves. The captain flashed irritation for a moment, but kept his cool. Furthermore, by order of His Honour, Lord Malgrave Fernbrook, you and the members of your preceptor service are henceforth and forever banned from the grounds of the bazaar, the captain said with a slight curl of satisfaction on his face. Banned? Frank's eyes narrowed. As in, if you are caught inside, I have been authorized to use whatever force necessary to remove you. That nasty curl of a smile again. What if I want some bread from my favourite bakery? Fraenk asked, watching his reaction. The captain's almost smile fell away. There's no longer a bakery in the market, I'm afraid, the captain said, not sounding sorry at all. After the fire, it was a complete ruin. Lord Fernbrook has declared a guard station will be built there in its place. Fraenk clenched his fist for a moment, then released it. "All right, Captain. Your message is received. You won't catch me inside the bazaar," Fraenk said levelly. The captain tipped his head slightly, the barest courtesy, then performed a crisp about-face and strode back to his men. They had been watching and now straightened again with their leader's approach. Fraenk pulled Nim by the collar and marched him away from the gates. "This entire situation is the darkest manner of foul," Fraenk growled once they were well out of earshot. "I know, sir, that was the best bread in the district." "Not that, you ground slug. Mycon's murder. This bent deal with the Fernbrooks. Not only a complete sanction for preceptors from entering the market, but they're covering it over with a guard post. It can only mean one thing." "They hate you specifically for killing their kin," Nim suggested. "Well, yes. Fine. It can mean several things, but it means there's a bigger plan at play here." Fraenk tapped his lip, thinking. "Sir, you may have had a little too much time to think in the dark," Nim said gently. "Bass Greenbrier was a lunatic. He killed a human family and you gave him what he deserved. Most would call that justice and let the whole thing be." Fraenk looked over at Nim, surprised. "I think we should try to find these Palewood Brethren lads." "That's too easy." Fraenk snapped his fingers and began to pace. "The Fernbrooks made a last-minute deal for that bakery, giving up a more valuable piece of territory, which Fernbrooks never do. Why is that bakery so important?" "Perhaps they wanted control of the lower market all along. Everyone knows how important Mycon was to the entire bazaar. No one set up shop there, save by his blessing." "I thought about that too. Then why kill him? They already owned his shop," Fraenk replied. "He wouldn't play nice, or they wanted their own man for the job. I've seen that happen plenty, before," Nim recalled with a grim expression. Fraenk nodded, but wasn't content to let the matter go. "There's something else. You remember Greenbrier's war dagger? Left it stuck right in the baker's back." Nim shuddered. "Exactly. That means he must have killed his wife and children first, before he spoke to Mycon. We just assumed it was the other way around." Nim looked shocked. "Why would he do that?" "Why, indeed." Fraenk pulled out his bottle and took a quick drink. He handed it to Nim, who nearly drained it. "One more thing. While I was enjoying my leisurely vacation in the Black Cells, I sent out a few inquiries and uncovered one more piece of the puzzle. Our psychotic little elven friend was no war hero like they're claiming him to be. He was an interrogator. His job was to break teeth and cut off tongues to find enemy gold and valuables. They don't give out property to torturers, and they definitely don't make midnight deals that lose them valuable territory just to give him one cozy little bakery as a war prize. Mycon must have had something of value, or knew something." Nim rubbed the point of his ear. "The answers must be inside that bakery, but I need to get in there before they turn it into a slossing guard post." They both cast a glance back over their shoulders at the downright excessive amount of guards posted there. Several men still had eyes on Fraenk and Nim across the distance. "Even without the army out front, it wouldn't be easy, sir. That's one thing the Scriffs always complained about. There's bars on the sewer holes and between buildings, spikes on the fence and any flat surface above. One way in and out." "Exactly. Who do you think worked to seal up all those weak points?" Fraenk said with a grim smile. "A minimal guard rotation with half a brain could protect it. Only a fool would attempt to venture inside. We have that much at least." Nim nodded. "What I really need is a distraction." "Why didn't you say so, sir?" Nim smiled. "I can help with that." Thank you for listening. Tune in next week for another exciting episode. And remember, the learned scholars of Greysage caution you that the veracity of these events remains unproven. Now go safe in the light of the powers, until our hands clasp again.